Hey, vintage hockey cards fans, welcome back to the channel. Found a new place to go to for vintage cards. It's a antique place just off the QEW near St. Catharines, I believe it is. It's right next to the lake. I've passed this place many times in the past and never always say, I'm going to stop in here one day and see what they got. I didn't think they'd have hockey cards. I was thinking more like records or something like that. Or just something, just something to check out. Go there and it's a big place. They got lots of vendors from, I think, middle of May all the way to the end of October. And there's 2 buildings you can go into and look around. So I found these from a vendor. And for 5 cards, I got $30 each. Originally, one was $6 and the rest were $7, but he gave me a deal on them, and this is really cool. The first 4 of these are from my dad's era, because I do have some of my dad. I have 11 of my dad's old cards, and 4 of these are from those from 2 of those sets. So let's go through these. So the first 3 are going to be from the 1953 Parkhurst set. So that's the 52-53 stat year. And I have center for the Detroit Red Wings, a guy named Glenn Scov. Never heard of him. The corners are soft. This is old cardboard. I'm not paying $100 for a mint condition card for a common guy. Played in 70 games. He had 12 goals, 15 assists for 27 points, 54 penalty minutes. From Wheatley, which is not like an hour away from me. Printed in Canada. Again, it's got some marks on it. It's not in bad shape. Glenn Scov spent 4 full years in Detroit. He actually won 3 Stanley Cups with the Detroit Red Wings. He won in 52, 54, and 55 with Detroit. He'd also won an IHL trophy with the Windsor Hecht Spitfires. And then won an EPHL with the Hull Ottawa Canadiens way back in the 60s. Yeah. So anyway, he plays for Detroit for 4 and a little seasons. Wins 3 Stanley Cups. Then he goes to play for Chicago Blackhawks for 5 seasons. Then plays 3 games in Montreal in 1960-61. In 650 NHL games, he had 106 goals, 136 assists for 242 points. 53 playoff games, he had 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points. Not a bad career. 3 Stanley Cups already. So in 1955, May 28th, traded from Detroit Red Wings with Tony Leswick, Johnny Wilson, and Benny White to Chicago for Dave Creighton, Gordon Bucky Hollingworth, John McCormick, and Jerry Topazani. Never heard of any of those 4 guys. Other than Tony Leswick, I've heard of. So in 1960, on June 7th, he was traded from Chicago Blackhawks with Terry Gray, player to be named later in future considerations and cash, to Montreal Canadiens for Reg Fleming, Ad McDonald, Bob Kersey, and Cecil Hoekstra. I'd say Chicago won that deal because Reg Fleming and Ad McDonald were pieces that could be traded later. But yeah, an interesting card. Never heard of this guy before. Now we have Boston Bruins center Edward Sandy Sanford. Again, this card is not in bad shape. It's more of you can see the hand drawing on this. So they take a photograph and then they draw it to bring out the black and white into color. 61 games, he had 14 goals, 21 assists for 35 points, 44 penalty minutes. And apparently you could send to 8-inch 96 patent Toronto for special album to hold 100 NHL players or large full-scale pictures of Montreal Canadiens hockey team. 52-53 Stanley Cup champions for 25 cents each. So you send 25 cents and you get something in return. So this card's in decent shape. Ed Stanford played 8 seasons with the Boston Bruins. Then in 1955-56 he played 4 games for the Red Wings, then went to Chicago for the 57 games. In 503 NHL games, he had 106 goals, 145 assists for 251 points. 42 playoff games, he had 13 goals, 11 assists for 24 points. Boston wasn't exactly a well-known... They get beat in the first round. I think only once they go past the first round in his time. June 3rd, 1955, traded from Boston Bruins with Riel Chevrolet Phils, never heard of him, Warren Godfrey, Gilles Boisvert, Norm Corcoran, Detroit Wings for Marcel Bonin, Terry Sawchuk, Vic Stanziak, and Lauren Davis. Detroit gave up a lot. Because Bonin, Sawchuk, and Stasiak, especially Sawchuk, good deal for Boston. Then on October 25th, 1955, he was traded from Detroit Red Wings to Chicago for Metro Pristol, or Preste. Another guy I never heard of. So not exactly a great player, not an all-star player with Boston, but in this set there's only 100 cards. 6 teams, 100 cards. So you're getting at least 15 players per team. More like 16. And next, staying with the Boston Bruins, we got a rookie card here. Number 97, defenseman William Frank Martin. This card does have a crease in it, unfortunately. So in 14 games played, he had 0 goals, 2 assists for 2 points. But in 41 games with Hershey, he had 5 goals, 4 assists for 9 points. Again, he's a defenseman, so he's not exactly a goal scorer. He's not a Bobby Orr. Not yet. Spent another year with Boston before going to Chicago, where he spent 3 more years, and then spent the rest of his career in the AHL for like the Buffalo Bisons, Quebec Aces, and Cleveland Barons. In 202 NHL games, he had 11 goals, 46 assists for 57 points, and then he had 10 playoff games, he had 2 assists. Not exactly a great player. And then he was traded from Boston Bruins to Chicago Blackhawks for Murray Costello. Murray Costello was a much better player, if I remember right. Not really. Hard to say who won that deal. I think Chicago won the deal because Murray Costello didn't stick around long either. So those are the 3 cards from that set. Now we're going with the 1954 Parkhurst set. So this is the 53-54 stat year. We're going to start with center for the Chicago Blackhawks. George G. Or Hully, as he was called. George Hully G. What differs these cards is they put the number of the card on the corner instead of at the back, like they do here. And the Blackhawks are using their old sweaters. 69 games, he had 10 goals, 16 assists for 26 points, 59 penalty minutes. Send 25 cents to Parkies, 96 Pat in Toronto for an album to hold your 100 NHL cards. So you can get an album. I don't know if my dad had ever done that. This was his era. Anyway, Hully G had played almost 3 seasons with Chicago before being traded to Detroit in 49. Won a Stanley Cup in Detroit in 1950. Then in 52, he was back in Chicago for 3 more years. Then he played Senior A hockey with the Windsor Bulldogs. So, lucky guy, won a Stanley Cup. 551 NHL games, 135 goals, 183 assists for 318 points. 41 playoff games, he had 6 goals, 13 assists for 19 points. So in 1948, October 26th, traded from Chicago Blackhawks with Norman Bud Pulley to Detroit for Jim Conacher, Armand Pep Gudulin, and Doug McCraig. Hard to say who won that deal because Conacher, Pulley, Armand Pep Gudulin, he once coached the Boston Bruins to a final. He also coached the Kansas City Scouts as an expansion team. And then later in 1951, August 19th, traded from Detroit Red Wings with Jim McFadden, Jim Peters, Claire Reagan, Claire Martin, and Max McNabb to Chicago Blackhawks for cash. And a player to be named later, Hugh Coughlin. I'm going to say Chicago won that deal too, but no one won a cup after that. Strange trade. This card's not in bad shape either. It's a little rough around the edges. But again, the age of these things is amazing. These are these sleeves they came in, so the sleeves makes it look older than it actually is. The last one we have is from the 1964 Parkhurst set. So the 63-64 stat year, and it is Toronto Maple Leafs center Ron Stewart. I have some of his older cards, like 1970s cards. So his last few cards, this is the youngest I have of him. Though he started his career much earlier. In that set, in the 64 set, he has 2 cards. So I'm kind of wondering how he has that. Anyway, Stewart played for the Toronto Maple Leafs from 1952 all the way up to 1965. Won 3 Stanley Cups with the Leafs. Played 2 seasons with the Boston Bruins. Then was in the expansion to the St. Louis Blues. Then went to the New York Rangers. Vancouver Canucks, probably an expansion again. New York Rangers again. Then New York Islanders. I think I have his Rangers card. It's one of his last ones. Was the head coach of the LA Kings for 1 year. Didn't know that. Anyway, played 1,353 NHL games, 276 goals, 253 assists for 529 points. 119 playoff games, he had 14 goals, 21 assists for 35 points. Only cracked the 20 goals barrier twice. Traded from Toronto Maple Leafs to Boston Bruins for Andy Heppenton, Orland Kurtenbach, and Pat Stapleton. I'm going to say Toronto won that deal. Claimed an expansion draft by St. Louis Blues from Boston Bruins, in 67. Again in 67, in November 27th, he was traded from St. Louis with Ron Atwell to the Rangers for Gordon Red Berenson and Barclay Plager. St. Louis won that deal. November 16, 1971, traded from New York Rangers with Wayne Connolly and Dave Ballin to Vancouver for Jim Wist and Gary Doak. I'm going to say Vancouver won that because Dave Ballin and Wayne Connolly, I don't know, but Gary Doak was pretty good. Then in March of 72, he was traded from Vancouver Canucks to Vancouver. Traded from Vancouver back to New York for cash. And then November 14th, 1972, traded from New York Rangers to New York Islanders for cash. At least he didn't have to travel far. It's not like going coast to coast. All right, so this set's really interesting. It has the British Union Jack in the back. So this card, like I said, this is definitely before the Maple Leaf became the official flag for Canada, and we would still use the red ensign. So we're still very much British until Pierre Trudeau came around and destroyed English nationalism in Canada. It's a little different from the set that came before it, where it's just red, but the same idea. What I like about this one is that there's a new hockey game. To obtain the new hockey game shown on one of the Zip hockey gum boxes, send $1, no stamps please, and 10 Zip 1963-64 hockey gum wrappers to Parkhurst Products Limited, P.O. Box 94, Don Mills, Ontario. Please print your name and address clearly and make sure you enclose it with wrappers and money. So $1 and 10 gum wrappers will get you this hockey game that's pictured in the bottom. Not quite air hockey, but kind of the idea. That's interesting. I like how they do that. They had little things at the back you could get. I remember getting the hockey lockers you could store cards in. I wish I hadn't thrown mine away, or my parents hadn't gotten rid of mine. But anyway, all you vintage hockey card fans out there, let me know what you guys think. Is that pretty cool or not? Leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, this has been Hockey Night in Belmont.